Let's talk about radical rest. This means a lot to all four of us. And in particular, I'll just say for me, this is a topic that I've been grappling with for well over a year. And it's been the subject of some of my Tributaries posts, but frankly, a lot of conversations that I'm having with you and with other leaders in the field. For me, I see radical rest as a spiritual practice. It's a racial justice issue, it's a social justice issue, and it's why it is so important that we're talking about it today. I see rest as something that is inherently human, right? It shows up in the various religions, spiritual practices. It's part of what I try to actually get my teenagers to do, is to figure out how to find rest as their bodies and minds are growing and expanding. And it's simply a part of what it means to be alive. All of us, all living beings actually, must rest regularly to stay alive. It's part of our survival and part of our resilience. This past year has amplified and exacerbated every facet of the issues people face on a daily basis. I know here at Headwaters, we are hearing from our grantees and community members about evictions. What does it mean to care for sick loved ones? How do we deal with extreme weather like a drought and climate change? What does it mean to navigate multiple disrupted school years? How do we face continued and pervasive police violence, and so much more than that? So that's just to set the context of why we need rest, let alone just daily lives that we're living, right? So I want to just start off with our first question, which is, what does radical rest mean for you, for your organization? And if I could, please I'll start with Nausheena, but as we get going, I would love for this to be more of a conversation and less me kind of moderating. So my hope is a little bit more free flowing.
Thank you, Maria. It's such an honor to be here with all of you tonight. What is radical rest? This was a question that sort of weighed heavy on my mind, and I was thinking about what Vanessa was saying around listening to the pleas in your body. And 2 weeks ago, I was feeling those pleas. I was physically just drained, lacked the energy that I needed to get through the day. Didn't have the emotional labor that needed to do the work that I'm doing, nor the mental capacity. And I remember talking to a friend saying, I just don't feel like doing anything right now. And doing anything meant I didn't want to do like work. I didn't want to study. I didn't want to do classes. I didn't want to work on the mission of my organization. And my friend, I'm so grateful for her. In a very short text, she said, listen to your body. And I didn't realize, but there are so many studies that tell us about how our body develops these habits and knows how to react when situations arise, just based on our historical situations and how we tend to react in certain ways. So clearly, me having these pleas, I felt like my body was telling me, like, you need to take a moment and rest. And so I did spend the day feeding my body, feeding my soul, feeding my mind, where I was in my spiritual sense, or having a home cooked meal, or being with my family. I needed to take that day to just turn everything else out. And what I realized was, when you're not working, I think people think that we're being lazy. And I also think that this is a stereotype that is thrown out at Black and brown bodies. And people don't realize that that's how we're reacting because of everything that's being demanded of us, right? And so this morning, I woke up to this horrific news of a Muslim cemetery could have exploded because somebody strategically placed 30 tires and cut a gas line. So a gas leak was present. And I know that cemeteries are constantly being desecrated, right? We hear about it with Jewish cemeteries, Muslim cemeteries. But the thought that crossed my mind was, the cemetery is this final resting place for us. And it just really stopped me in my tracks that they won't even let us rest in our final resting place. And as I'm sitting here, my body is again reacting. I can feel the anxiety streaming through my legs, through my body as I'm talking to you. And it just makes me realize that, like Vanessa said, we have to listen to those pleas, and we have to step back, and we have to rest.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that this idea of what does it take for people who are in community and in movements, the fact that if our bodies can't even have their final resting place, what does that mean? And it's a piece that we see throughout our lives of being constantly vigilant, right? Paying attention to the news cycle, being in contact with our members, all of those things. And that is exhausting, and it's actually not the way that we should be living, right?
Yeah. And I mean, I'm even thinking about, it's not so much the people who are in the cemetery, it's all the rest of us, that feel like, that really question, should we rest? Are we allowed to rest when there's constant violence all around us?
Mm-hmm.
What that makes me think about is, my ancestors were enslaved. And what I often remind people, Black folks particularly, who have ancestors like I did, who didn't actually have a lot of choice and didn't actually have the opportunity to rest, is that it's our sort of birthright now, that I owe it to my ancestors in this day and age to be able to be in a space of choice. And when I can, to actually de-armor. You all are just talking about being hyper vigilant and always sort of waiting for the next thing to happen. Sheena, you're waking up in the morning and hearing another, yet another piece of devastating news. And our bodies are there ready to react. And we owe it to ourselves when we can to be able to soften, to de-armor, to take the time that we need to listen in and know what it is that we need to do, that allow our bodies and sort of our nervous systems to settle in. And one of my teachers, the amazing Thea Lee, who's a somatics practitioner in Minneapolis, talks about the fact that we are all mammals, like as human beings, we're mammals, and we need community and we need each other. And one of the ways that we can rest down is with community, is when we're in the arms of the people who we know can keep us safe. Feeling them there with us can allow us to have an opportunity to really rest in. And there's all kinds of ways to do that. It doesn't mean sleep. It could be dancing. It could be eating some really good food together. It could be laughing and joking. It could just be laying around. It could be being in the garden together and harvesting food. But knowing that we can feel each other, we're in community, which gives our bodies a chance to feel safe.
Yeah, I was saying this when we had met not long ago to kind of prepare for today, but one of the things that I said was I was so sad that we weren't having this conversation in person. And one of the reasons is I'm used to when I'm in person with Noshena, she grabs my hands and we hold hands, and that's part of like that care, right? And I love that part of our friendship. And I think it's such a simple act, right? Just somebody holding your hand just for a moment. But I know for me, when I feel that, my body instantly kind of melts a little bit. And I'm like, oh yeah, this person really loves me. And I feel really held in that space, just in that simple moment.
Yeah, I just want to actually take a moment to recognize where our breath might be right now. Mm-hmm. I mean, you talked about, I just like watching people on the panel breathe. And if you're watching, I think our breath can often be the diagnostic tool that the universe gives us to check in about what's happening with our body and with our well-being. And I noticed my own in hearing the news, and I know that we are all constantly churning in the news of trauma, that I felt my own body just feeling heavy and feeling my own breath being caught and held. And I think, you asked what radical rest. I think that part of what radical rest is being able to connect to our breath. have the conditions where a beloved can place touch on our hands, where we can, I was really moved by Vanessa's words and was kind of jotting down little phrases. And, Vanessa shared this radical imagination. Like, I don't know that we can imagine anything if we can't actually breathe. I don't know if we can, in the ways that Vanessa brought Mary Oliver's words, vanish into something better if we can't breathe. And so I think radical rest is in part being able to connect with our breath and being able to have touchstones in our life, in our work, that allows us to connect to our breath. And in doing so, invites a connection to other people. And other people on this have already said, Marie, thank you. Like, we're mammals. Maria, we all need rest. Like, we all sort of like recognize it. We all know it. And I'm coming out on today's broadcast to say that, I stand as the person who is facilitating rest for other people and not being the best at actually taking the rest. And I think that as women of color, as a woman in a Black body, that is some of the lineage that we carry in our work, is that care, that constant care for others. And so, yes, I'm coming out that I need to do better with my own rest. The beloveds hold me accountable. They be trying. Marie's laughing because she knows me. And you said it. But I think it's also like I think we owe it to our ancestors and we owe it to each other to be able to name the behaviors for each other. That is to say, when I look out of my eyes, I am driven to make the world a better place. Like, whatever place I'm at, like, I feel driven. I feel like it's a responsibility to my family, to my community, to my elders, to my ancestors, like to future generations, like to be in righter relationship with this stolen land as people whose labor was stolen. Like, that is, I feel driven. And that drive means I can only see this. And I need community to help me pull back my peripheral vision and reflect back to me, actually, it's cool that you're doing a lot, but you're doing too much.
Right.
So I think that that's the other part about radical rest, does require relationship to community so that we can find our breath.
Yeah, the one, I appreciate you just bringing back the poetry that Vanessa shared. I mean, part of, just connecting between Vanessa's piece and then Mary Oliver's pieces. Vanessa's calling on us to still ourselves, right? And then Mary Oliver is actually telling us what we would get to see if we were to still ourselves, and what we would get to see are the small kingdoms, right?
Yes.
We actually get to notice the world around us. And I think like that is just like one of those pieces that I'm really sitting with. I'm sitting in my home office. One of the visuals that I get every day is I have a huge old maple tree in my backyard. It's gorgeous. It's starting to turn colors, right? Oh. But if I'm not taking the moment to just take a breath and sit with that, then I don't get to see that kingdom is happening in my backyard. The birds are sitting there. I was just visited by a female cardinal, right? Like, what does that mean for us? And how do we then take those moments and use it as fuel, right, for the work that we're doing? Because you're absolutely right. We are 4 women of color who've been socialized in a particular society. And we are, as my friend Alicia always says, we are our ancestors' wildest dreams. And so it is our responsibility actually to take care of ourselves, because this is what they worked so hard for, right? These are the sacrifices. And who are we to squander that, right?
Yeah, that's really real. I was on a call earlier today, and a dear friend and colleague brought to my attention a podcast that she had been listening to and an author she had been exploring. And I got to tell y'all, I ain't read this book yet, but I think I'm gonna have to read this book by Kevin Quashie, because this book that is titled, so grab your pens and pencils, which I think is amazing, the sovereignty of quiet beyond resistance in Black culture. And I think that one of the things, and I haven't read the book, so I'm going to have to report back again, hold me accountable, beloveds, is that the cycle that we have been thrust into to have to resist, to have to build an armor of resilience, to have to make a way out of no way, means that we have uplifted certain kinds of Blackness that maybe actually don't serve us individually or collectively in the expansiveness of Blackness. And in this podcast where author Kevin is talking about his book, says, resistance is just a powerful frame for understanding Black people's experience, but it is only one frame. There are others. What are we missing because of the power and singularity of that idea? Can we rethink the multiplicity of frames and think of rest as resistance? And of course, our beloved Audre Lorde talks about that as deeply political warfare and not self-indulgent in terms of taking care of ourselves. It's not a new idea, but it is one that I think we wrestle with in daily practice.
Yeah. Well, I think this is a really good segue, actually, Signe, to have us actually start to think about what role money plays in the idea of radical rest, right? So what we know, and I'll say we are a social justice community foundation. Both Rootsprings and Rise are grantees of Headwaters, and we have a financial relationship, right? And so we know movements need finances. They need money to be able to do the work. But we also know that wealth and philanthropy are often upheld through institutions that center toxic practices of white supremacy and capitalism. Right?
You better speak that truth.
We see it in, I'm sure we all could just name and picture the people that we know who have completely burned out of movement work or on the verge of burning out. And part of it is because we just continue to uphold these practices and culture of white supremacy that, frankly, right, we know this commodifies our bodies.
Yep.
And ensures that what we are producing is the greatest number of widgets for society. And what we know is that actually isn't. That's not going to change the world. And so in movements, we see this huge grind and hustle culture that keeps people super stretched. And in his book, Decolonizing Wealth, Edgar Villanueva writes, money should be a tool for love, to facilitate relationships, to help us thrive, rather than to hurt or divide us. If it's used for sacred, life-giving, restorative purposes, it can be medicine. And so as you're thinking about this, what is the role that money actually plays in radical rest? And I think we could debate whether it should and the merits and harms of capitalism and the way that money flows in this society. But let's be real. We're talking right now, and I know I actually have several philanthropic colleagues who are on this call with us today. They're listening to you. So what do you want to tell them about the power, control, and money they have, and the ways in which they could be supporting your rest?
I have so much to say, but I would like to offer the microphone to my beloveds on this panel first, before I go.
I mean, I'll just open up and say, what if we had everything we needed?
Yeah.
Come through.
What if we didn't have to worry about having a place to live? We didn't have to worry about getting food. We didn't have to worry about actually being able to pay for our health care if we get sick. What if we had everything we needed? How would radical rest be possible then?
Yeah.
I'll just add, so we have such a hustle culture, right? That's what I think America is kind of known for, is just always being in the hustle of getting things done. And there isn't space in this environment to rest. And so, yesterday, Maria knows this, was my birthday, and I took the day off because I wanted a day for myself. And just like any other executive director, I found myself often on my phone checking emails, right? I know I shouldn't have done it. I know, but I was waiting in line for something and I just happened to. As I'm checking the emails, there's one from a foundation. I missed a grant deadline. Okay. And for a moment I was like, I can't take a day off. Like I can't even enjoy the day that I was born. Right. And I'm grateful that I have this fantastic high performing team that I was able to just quickly forward on and said, hey, you guys handle this. But I just thought to myself that what if philanthropy is actually perpetuating this hustle culture and is not allowing us to rest? What if philanthropy, when I think about like what a $10,000 grant is going to do in eradicating Islamophobia in 12 months, right? You're asking me to change systems and institutions with this tiny little grant. And I realize that that is perpetuating this hustle culture, this constant go, 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 and not finding rest. And so to find financial rest, for once it would be nice to not have to worry about where money is going to come from. Oh, you guys, hold on. That's the time for prayer. 1 second.
This is real life, right?
What a great reminder, though.
Yeah.
That it's a time for prayer.
That's right. That's right.
Did you want to finish your thought?
What was I saying? I was saying, wouldn't it be great just for once not have to worry about where the money is coming from to pay for my staff, to pay for the programming, to pay for healthcare, and just feeling like I can do the work, but also take the time to rest and not have to worry. I think that is what I would like to see for financial rest.
Yeah. Real talk. I mean, I yes to all the things that have already been said. I'm going to say this, that there is no liberation without rest, because freedom doesn't look like I am dying. Freedom doesn't look like my community is hurting. So we don't get free without rest. That's very clear to me. I think that the role of money inside of Radical Rest is huge in so many different ways. We need to be funding rest. We need to be funding people who are doing the work. We need to be thinking about the allocation of resources, and are we uplifting, all of the hurtful things about capitalism. I'm going to say that one of the things that American exceptionalism has taught us is how to regurgitate our trauma to each other. We are so good at it.
Yeah.
I would say expert. And I think it happens in philanthropic ways as well. So I'm going to speak to a segment maybe of the population who's watching today. So if you're working in philanthropy, I got questions for you. Do you feel pulled in multiple directions? Do you feel clear? Do you feel like you are getting the rest as a worker bee inside of the philanthropic machine? And I'm going to guess that a lot of people don't. I'm going to guess that people are working inside of institutions where they are feeling the heavy toll of trying to do the right thing without the right resources, to try to move the needle on something that feels like it is running in a different direction. And I think that part of that is that regurgitation of the trauma. Inside of the nonprofit industrial complex, we have this system that says to administer, we only want to fund the program. We want to fund the program. We want to fund the deliverables. We want to fund the outcomes. We want to see the evidence that your work matters.
Right. And
you better do that with 20 to 15% of administrative overhead to get it done. And it's bullshit.
Right.
It actually takes work, energy, effort, labor, a lot of it invisible, because let's be real about emotional labor, but so much of that. And so I think that part of it is we have to break free of the modalities about how we distribute resources in order for liberation to be possible. And so that means recognizing that deadlines maybe should be fluid, that your final report needs to be like, it was good. That might mean, right, those are it might be like, no, there isn't a cap for how much money how much money do you actually need to do the work? There is not you put in a grant for $10,000 and we're going to come back and say, oh, we can give you 5. What can you do for that? That's a hustle and bustle that is a part of a very tried trope that puts people in a place where they cannot rest. And so I think the role of money is to actually get out of the way, to see money as a resource and a tool. And I will tell you, I have my own healing to do around thinking about money as not a weapon, because money has been weaponized. In my communities, it has been extracted from our bodies as a resource. And so how do we unweaponize money and make it the resource that, to Marie's very early point, we all are just getting our needs met? So I'll say that. And then that's one thing. So like, let's just try it in a better, more sustainable way. The other piece, and this speaks to the work that we're doing at Rootsprings, that we recognize that rest has to be a part of movement work. We are not going to get there with people's fumes. Mm-hmm. People's tanks need to be full. If that's a bad example, like your vascular system, your blood needs to be fully oxygenated. You can't live on CO2 in order to move through the world. So what are the places and spaces where we say you deserve to get the oxygen that your body needs so that your organs and your system can function in the ways that are actually powerful, that are resilient, sure, even though I find that word problematic, that are innovative, that are, full. And so what does that mean? Giving money to us? Absolutely. So that we can make the space, because the space doesn't currently exist. And what we have come to understand, and I'm going to lob the ball a little bit to Marie here on this one, because Marie has visited the land and has been there. And I think that part of what we need to do is create ritual and create habit around nurturing our entire systems. And what we have come to understand is that the land can hold things that we can't hold. That I can stand in the driveway of the land and look up at the stars and be stuck for an undetermined period of time, because I can feel the awesomeness of being connected to a larger universe than is just me and my little problems. And so we have a program that invites people to be in regular relationship to the land, to engage in sacred economy, saying, I'm going to come back to the land regularly. And so we call that our community supported retreat. And Marie is a member. And I want to know, why did you become a community supported retreat member so that you could come to the land multiple times in 1 year?
I did it so that I have space and time to fall into the sacred, to rest into the sacred, to be, they have a, a maze, labyrinth out there that I walk. It's kind of my favorite place on the land. And I spend a lot of time walking that labyrinth and just having open time and space, and being able to like have a night where I sleep outside by myself, not outside, but in a hermitage, without my family, allows me the space and time for things to emerge. That is what I have learned, is that rather than doing and planning and thinking and sort of looking ahead to the future, one of the things that radical rest has allowed me to do is to let things emerge. That's what it's made possible for me. Walking through the doors that are opening, seeing the doors that are closing, being able to be in touch with the things beyond the intellect that guide the work that I do.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, what I'm really hearing in this conversation is that rest is sacred, right? It's spiritual. It's this practice that we do that not only gives our bodies, minds, and souls an opportunity for respite, but also actually opens up a lot of possibility, right? And so what I'm wondering about for you, for your organization, for the work you're doing, right? We are all here because we want to change the world. That's why we are called to do the work that we do. So what does rest make possible?
just want to know, do you see everybody just breathed? Everybody did a big deep breath.
Yeah.
I'll start off real quick, Maria. A few weeks ago, we had a very tragic death in our community. A young woman took her life. So I apologize that this could be triggering for some. But it's in reference to something earlier one of us said about burnout and what burnout does to us, especially those of us that are in this movement. But this person was an activist in the community. She's an educator, and she just did not feel that she was making a difference in the work that she was doing, and that she couldn't change the system, right? She talked about how billionaires are going off to the moon, and yet we still don't have clean water in parts of our community. And so what does radical rest mean? It means that we save a life, that we save a community, that we save our humanity, that we find joy in our existence because we have the opportunity to rest. And so I loved what Signe said about rest being an act of resistance, because they don't want us to rest, right? And if I could have helped this person, and there are obviously many other reasons, but I can't get over what an extreme moment of burnout could lead to.
Yeah.
I think rest allows us to see things in ways, in new ways. One of the things that Cornel West talks about in terms of the blues is that the blues allows us to see beyond what is current, what is happening right now, to imagine what can be. Afrofuturism, and I think rest allows us to tap into places in our bodies that are wiser than just our minds, to listen in, not just to ourselves, but to each other, and to create what we need to transform the systems that we're in right now. I don't think that we are trying to do something that's already been done. I think we need to do things that have yet to be. And I think a rest allows us to tap into that together.
Yeah, before I say anything, I just want to remind Maria that you're a part of this panel discussion too. So
I'm being schooled.
How would you answer that question?
Yeah, I mean, so I've been in this position. I've been with Headwaters for over 7 years, but I've been in this specific role for 2. And before I took on the helm of Headwaters, I took a sabbatical. And I'm really fortunate because at Headwaters, we have a sabbatical policy that not only supports somebody like me in my position, but actually supports all staff. And I took that time, to really ready myself for the next phase of my life. This isn't just my career, but really doing this work is my calling. And what that made possible was for me to come into this role after 8 weeks of rest. And I truly rested. I spent a lot of time walking my dogs. I cooked. I found docks on the side of lakes all over the Twin Cities and read books. Like, that's how I spent my time. And I came back open, and I came back excited and ready to hear what my team dreamed about, what they wanted. And that's what made it possible, frankly, for me to, in March of 2020, right? We all remember March of 2020, the world shut down. And honestly, without that time off, I'm not sure I would have been ready to lead in that moment. And it was certainly exhausting. I remember calling my best friend in tears a week into it, just being desperate. But honestly, I felt like I had the support I needed because I had taken some time to really reflect on who was in my life and the relationships I wanted during that sabbatical. So for me, rest makes leadership possible.
That feels powerful to me. Yeah. I mean, I think if we think about what are the ingredients necessary for love, for transformation, for liberation, I think we would be hard pressed to say that we could actually get to those kinds of outcomes without rest. And I want to be in a world where we know how to love each other better. I want to be in a world where we know how to be in deep care and deep community with each other. And I don't think we can do that without rest. And so what's possible with rest? So much. What's not possible without rest? Well, we already know the answers to that question. And it is charged and it is painful. And there are many people who I think we have looked up to over time, who we have held up on a pedestal. And they're not here in part because of a lack of rest.
Right.
And so it is critical, it is urgent, it is critical, it is paramount, it is pick your big word, fill in, that we figure out how to crack the code on rest. And I think there's also a part of this that is like, rest allows us to unlock our imagination in ways that we can innovate. And I want to name, and this is kind of a connection to the last question about what money can do. I don't want rest to be a luxury.
Yes.
Like, and I also, and part of that is like recognizing the worthiness of different kinds of labor. And to me, that's what like a healthy movement ecosystem sees. And we have a lot of work to do that because we have gendered labor such that we could undervalue it, underpay it, under resources. We have like massive crises around equity and parity in resourcing work and labor and all of it. I think that when we can name rest as a priority, like here's something wild. Like, what if rest and naming where rest lives inside of a grant became one of the stupid criteria we're holding people accountable to?
Right.
Like,
are you caring for your people?
Yeah. Like real talk. Like I see your $25,000 budget and I don't see nowhere in here how you are paying people to just shut up and sit down and breathe.
Yeah.
And I'm not
How
saying,
are you caring for yourself?
Yeah. Right. And I'm not saying that I don't want to be trite or dismissive or diminutive about how easy I think it's going to be to move rest into the realm of what we nurture, the norm of how we engage with each other. But I do want to challenge us to think about what if rest wasn't radical,
right,
and was just the expectation.